welcome to the Dark Shadows podcast with your co-hosts Vicky Ray, Tom Diamond, and Keith Chowell, bringing you all the odd goings-on from Collinsport, Maine.
Welcome to the Rondo-nominated Literary License Podcast, and today we're discussing Dark Shadows, episodes 178 to 201. Before we get started, let's find out who's with us. We have Vicky Ray. Hello, Vicky.
Hey, guys.
And Tom Diamond. Hello, Tom.
Hello, everybody. And isn't it great that we're all nominated for a Rondo Award? I think it's fantastic, and what else can I say? Well, for us.
Wow, I know. That's great. I'm just happy somebody, I don't care if we win or not. I'm just really glad somebody recognized us. That right in and of itself is pretty cool.
They always say that nominations are even more important than if you actually get the award.
The other's just a bonus. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the same people who say that are the same people who say that bullshit on top of you is good luck. So we rather be winners.
I would like to win. I'm not saying I don't want to win. But...
I definitely want to win because the winners then can get their awards in, I think it's Louisville, Kentucky, over the Memorial Day weekend. They have a special ceremony where you go up and get the award. So wouldn't it be cool? Because we never actually met, any of us, in person. We're all doing this online.
Well, I know that guy right there. So
that's true.
I have not met in
that's true. I never met either, so I sit corrected. Yeah. So, but we can all get together if we win, and
that would be great.
Bash each other's heads in and all that.
Yeah.
Can we wear jeans?
So,
and I hope it's not a white tie affair. Oh God, I have to rent the tux. Oh no.
Oh no, I'm getting out my white leisure suit from Saturday Night Fever. Polyester all the way.
Maybe you could do the dance there, Keith. You know?
Yeah, I can.
You could do a disco thing while we're
my black platforms. Out I come.
He'll break out
my 5'7" to my 5'9".
Disco right onto the stage if they call you. You know that would be.
Yeah. I'm gonna practice my arm twirling now and my jazz hands.
Yeah, there you go.
Before we get started, we like to do our Rose and Thorn sections, and what basically for our newcomers, Rose and Thorn is what we liked of the week and what we disliked of the week. So, Vicky, I'm going to start with you. What is your Rose of the week and what's your Thorn of the week?
I don't know. My Rose started this morning. Actually, it should have been a Thorn, but it was pretty funny because people who know me know not to do this, but it was funny anyway because I have my phone and my email were blown up. Someone put me on the Bernie Sanders fundraiser list. I don't know who did it.
Good for them.
But I mean, I've been getting all this crap up, raising money for Bernie, and I just started laughing. I couldn't, I'll find out who it is. It'll be
one day we got to get Bernie Sanders on here, and he can do a guest star. He can do that too. Absolutely.
Yeah. Someone put me on the Elizabeth Warren one. So I think
Oh
that
my
has to do with
God.
all
Yeah,
my.
they did that to me like 4 months ago. So it's,
Yeah.
I know it could be one of you. I don't know.
Oh no,
But
it's not
so
me.
I
I can
said,
promise
well
you, it's not
played,
me.
well played. But I really don't really have a thorn this week. Though. Okay, I got a thorn. Passive aggressive posting. If you want to call somebody a bitch, just frickin' do it. Don't do this passive aggressive victimization bullshit. Thank you.
I
hate
agree.
passive-aggressive.
I'm not into victimizations at all. I don't care if you are a victim and a real victim, but most people who victimize themselves, they're not really victims. They're just like, yeah.
Closet narcissism.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And so, Tom, what's your rose and thorn of the week?
Well, the rose, my fiance and I are going to be undertaking a major move next month, the middle of March. We're not moving too far from where she is. I have to get my stuff out of my apartment. And as moves have positives as well as negatives. And of course, the positive thing, we're moving to a nice 2-bedroom, much larger than mine, definitely larger than hers. And of course, I'm in Florida, so it's 250 feet from the swimming pool and jacuzzi, which
That's so important.
I am definitely going to need that. And that's especially because of my thorn. The fans may or may not know the kind of prep that we do for this kind of thing, and it is kind of extensive. I wound up watching the episodes the other day, sitting in the chair too long, and I threw my back out.
Welcome to Vicky's world.
Keith, I'm going to ask for workers' compensation.
I know.
No, but it was it's a joy. It really is. But right now, I'm sitting down with a pillow between the chair and my back.
We getting old. We just getting old.
I'm getting older, like the caretaker.
I love that guy. Don't knock the caretaker. I love him.
Oh, I'm not knocking him. I love him. Daniel Keyes is one of my favorite people.
Oh, I think he's funny.
He really is. No,
I love him.
I want to get into a couple of his lines later on. So my thorn is that so I've taken my Motrin and sitting now more comfortably, and I've got something called diclofenac, which
that stuff puts me to sleep.
Well, no, it doesn't. It's interesting. It doesn't put me to sleep. Well, how does it pronounce, Keith?
Diclofenac.
Thank you.
Oh, is that what you call it?
Thank you. And
it sick too.
It helps. It for a little bit. It's temporary. It helps. So I just
What's very good for a back as well is Voltarol gel, which is diclofenac gel, but it's actually better than taking it orally because that way it absorbs through the skin and it's quick acting and it lasts for about 12 to 24 hours depending on the diclofenac.
What's it called? Because I need this shit.
Voltarol gel.
Voltarol. I've never heard of it.
Voltaren, I've heard of that. Yeah,
but but basically it's just diclofenac gel.
Right.
Voltarol is the manufacturer.
It's better for your insides too if it doesn't go through your whole system too. All that.
I prefer the gel because you could put it right on the affected area and
it lasts longer as well. It lasts longer than.
Yes. Yeah,
I think pills last for about 4 to 6 hours, and the diclofenac can last for 12 to.
It just seems
12
like
to 18 hours, depending on what strength you get.
Go.
Seems like yesterday we were running from the cops with our case of beer on the north side, and now we all have backaches.
Vicky, that was you last week. What are you talking about?
Hey, I'm not under 21 anymore.
I guess that brings me to my rose and thorn. My thorn basically is Facebook to a small extent. Why does it need to bring up memories from like when we first entered? Because about 10 years ago, I went through a really bad breakup or divorce, and there's this thing that at the time social media was in its infancy, and I put a lot of cringeworthy stuff on there, and now it's all popping up like this because the anniversaries that come up, and so I'm reading stuff going and I'm moaning and groaning to myself and reading people's comments. I feel like I was a really attention giver, was really looking for a lot of attention, and I really hate it. So I really
I think we all
I really hate
weird shit.
anniversaries on Facebook. I really hate them. I'm sorry.
I delete them all, especially if I'm tagged in that way, because I don't want to see that shit. It doesn't ever need to come up again.
I'll be like, I got posts on there like, oh, maybe tomorrow will be a better day. I know I can be stronger. It's like, like, oh dear Lord. Lessons we learned using social media. Now I use it mainly for work, and it's great for keeping in touch with close friends.
What was wrong with us when it first started?
I didn't think we realized that this stuff will come back and haunt us every single year.
Oh, it's on there forever. It's like having herpes for life, man. That shit just keep popping up.
I have two friends. I have a really close friend who died, Eric, about 5 years ago now, and a really close friend who died about 7 years ago, Sarah, and their Facebook pages are still going. It's kind of weird. So
it's sort of like my son. His Facebook page keeps going. I think it makes people that are left behind feel better, to share memories and whatever.
It is a bit odd considering that when I pass, my Facebook page will live on. It's like, oh dear Lord.
If I outlive you, I'm going to make sure you have an active Facebook page, Pete. Don't worry.
Oh, great. Can hardly wait.
We'll all have to pay tribute when
you get cremated. I'll have you right here in your urn. We'll still do it together, man.
When I get cremated, I'm going to be flushed down the toilet because I figured I can go more places that way than anywhere else.
Now that's a very interesting possibility, Keith.
But my rose of the week has to be the show Soundtrack on Netflix. I suggest everyone watch it. It stars Madeline Stowe and Campbell Scott, and a fairly new set of younger actors as well. It's basically it's a musical sort of thing, but they're not singing; they're actually miming to other people's music, and they do some really fantastic mashups on there as well.
Does Madeline Stowe sing?
No, they're not singing. They're miming to the actual songs themselves. It's
I haven't heard of that one.
With everyone's life, there's a soundtrack, and what songs soundtrack your life, and it jumps back and forth, and it deals with the death of a daughter and how the people behind are forced to reconcile their lives. Fantastic. It's only 10 episodes, but very well acted, and I really loved it and couldn't get enough of it. I watched it twice, actually. I watched it once on my own, then watched it with Isaac.
I always like Madeline Stowe. A lot of people don't like her, but I really actually like her a lot.
She does the bitch stuff very well. Ever since Revenge, that's pretty much the role she does. And what else have I been catching my eye out there? Oh, Avenue 5, which is an HBO comedy series, which is a total piss take of science fiction's spaceships, kind of like the Orville, but this is basically like a cruise liner in space. So basically it's about Hugh Laurie, and basically he's the captain of this cruise liner that basically gets into trouble, and they're supposed to be away for 1 month, and it looks like they're going to be away for 18 months, and everything goes wrong, and you find out that Hugh Laurie isn't the captain. He was just there because they liked his British accent, and no one knows what they're doing, and it's really, really funny, so I highly suggest that as well. And that brings us to our Out of the Shadows episodes with Tom Diamond, where Tom Diamond is going to give us the ins and outs of what's happening during Dark Shadows and all the bloopers and backstage information. So, Tom, take it away.
Thank you, Keith. So we have a number of things to talk about today. The first thing for those fans who do not know, that the entire original run of Dark Shadows, which of course has been on Amazon Prime and still is now also available on IMDb free, which is also, I understand, under Amazon, and you can access IMDb under Amazon Fire Stick if you have it. So that is another way, in case you're not able to get Amazon Prime to view the show. The other thing, of course, the other big thing that I'm going to announce is we know John Carlin, Willie Loomis, who is still sorely missed, who passed away on January 22nd at age 86 due to congestive heart failure. And we have this from Kathy Resch through her Shadowgram. Kathy is the maven of Dark Shadows. There will be a memorial service celebration of John Carlin on Saturday, April 25th at the Vista Theater in Los Angeles, California. And the address for that is 4473 Sunset Drive in Hollywood. Actually, so I said it's in Hollywood, I should say. It'll be starting at 12:30. There will be a, Remembering John Carlin video presentation. There will be guest speakers. James Storm, who is also a Dark Shadows actor, he comes on much later as Gerard, will do a song tribute. There's a little, apparently they have a little video of John saying things. There will be reception and refreshments. So this is from 12:30 p.m. Pacific time to 3:30 p.m. If any of you are interested in attending, please send RSVPs to Shadowgram, capital S and Gram is capital G. Shadowgram, one word, at AOL.com. So that brings us now to this block, and we have some stuff to talk about. I'm going to try to get through it very fast. The guest stars, first of all. This marks the first appearance of the Willie Loomis character in episode 199. Now, the new fans who do not know about this will be interested to find out that John Carlin was not the first actor to play Willie Loomis. The first actor was James Hall. And James Hall appeared for 5 episodes. In 199, he makes his first appearance. The character is kind of talked about on the phone by the Jason MacGuire character, which we're going to get into in a minute. Jimmy Hall is still with us. He lives in California. He had a Broadway career before he went into Dark Shadows. He actually trained at Uta Hagen with Catherine Leigh Scott, and she happened to mention that when we interviewed her last year. And he did a few things. He's happily retired now. He actually was the runner-up, I believe, for Midnight Cowboy. And if he had gotten that, I think he was up for the John Voight role. And if he had gotten, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong. But there's always what ifs. But we say hello to we say hello to Jimmy Hall, and we hope he's doing well. Okay, Ivor Francis in episode 191, who had a day role as Dr. Franklin when Liz wakes up in the hospital. And Ivor Francis was a noted stage, I should say, TV star in the 1950s and 60s. And he had a daughter. He has a daughter by the name of Jeannie Ann Francis. Vicki, have you heard of Jeannie Francis?
Yes, I have.
And that's from?
General Hospital.
And the name of her character?
Laura Spencer, or Laura Webb.
Laura. So we have a very interesting irony there. Jeannie Francis's Laura versus the Dark Shadows Laura. Okay, Dennis Patrick, who comes on as Jason MacGuire, starting in episode 193. Dennis Patrick also had a noted TV career for a good from the 50s through the 90s, I believe. He was also in the House of Dark Shadows movie. I believe he played the sheriff. And he will be coming back, and I don't want to give it away, but he comes back in another role much later on in the series. And I'm not going to give that name away, but you're going to see him again, and we'll talk about that. Okay, also in episode 93, we had an actress by the name of Lovelady Powell, otherwise known as Lovey Powell. And no, this is not Lovey from Gilligan's Island. She played Portia Fitzsimmons. Portia Fitzsimmons was the art dealer who tells Sam that she really loves his paintings, wants to set them up in an art gallery, and this leads to a whole plot thing because Sam is now trying to get back the paintings that she wants from Roger from 10 years ago. Lovelady Powell was actually in, she was in a few things, not too many, but a notable thing, I don't know if you guys remember The Possession of Joel Delaney, which was a movie.
I remember it.
She played Erica in that movie. She was in possession of Joe Delaney in 1973. I remember it too. She was basically doing a lot of clubbing in the 50s, and had some minor roles on soap operas. She just passed away on February 2nd of this year. Right, just 22 days ago, so about approximately, at the ripe old age of 89 in Long Island. And so that is her contribution to Dark Shadows. We also see Rosemary McNamara in episode 184. She comes back once again as Josette's ghost when she's pointing David out to Dr. Guthrie while he's having one of his usual attacks by Laura. And then, of course, in the Blue Whale, we see regular Bob McConnell, the bartender, again in a couple of episodes, and George McCoy, who will once again be coming back as an extra. And George McCoy is especially noted for almost getting into a fight with Jimmy Hall in the episode where he first appeared. Okay, a lot of bloopers. And I'm going to go through them very quickly, but they're very funny. In episode 178, we have multiple shots, actually, of Mike Shadows on Roger's face and his body, and he's speaking with Laura. If you want to know how they made mics in those days, just look at Roger's body. In episode 179, in the crypt, as you enter, you see a stage light as the camera is panning. To the left in its darkness, so you can see that light. You got to be very fast to see this. One of my favorites in episode 180, you had a couple of bloopers there. The coffin is opening by itself because Josette is making the coffin open to see that there's no body in there. You can see the string pulling the coffin up if you look very closely. There's also a special effect of flickering lights in the crypt window. In episode 181. So Guthrie is talking about Laura, and he meant to say Laura Stockbridge in the crypt, but instead he said Laura Radcliffe, and Laura Radcliffe was the one who was buried in the. Was that? Yep.
She was buried in the yard. Yeah.
That's right. So he said Laura Radcliffe by mistake when he actually meant Laura Stockbridge. Okay. In episode, now this is really trivial, but in episode 184, when Guthrie is having the famous second attack and Laura's putting him under a trance, and of course he's discovered by David this time. Joseph points him out to David. So in 184, he's on his side, and when David finds him, he's like cranking his head and looking at David. It looks like a really uncomfortable position. He could almost break his back like me.
Right.
And then in the next episode, I guess he must have said, "Hey guys, this is uncomfortable." So in the next episode, his back is to the fireplace. So he's in a much more comfortable position to emote.
Got it.
Absolutely. Okay. Episode 185. David is putting on his coat to go to Laura, and he almost drops it, and he picks it up. Very fast kid, David Hennessy. I mean, that could have been a real spoiler, but he was about to drop that coat, and he picked it right up and put it on. It was really good. We also, in that episode, see a Klieg light in the old house window. We've seen that before, but it's still there. 186, this really gets me. This is the moving payphone in the Blue Whale. We have seen in other episodes, we originally saw the pay phone booth in the Blue Whale, which mysteriously was taken out and wound up in the Collinsport Hotel. This time in 186, we see the pay phone to the right of the bar. And then in a later episode, the pay phone mysteriously moves back to its original place, which was right next to the door on the other side of the set. And I love the fact that Sam, in that episode, is trying to call David down from upstairs to do the seance. And Sam says, "Come on down." And he reminded me of The Price is Right, actually. In 187, Burke is carrying David into the darkened Collinwood. And it was a very darkened set. And I think somebody realized that, and they put the floodlights on. But no switch had been pressed. So all of a sudden, they're talking in the dark, and all of a sudden you see the light shining on them. In episode 189, okay, and here you have to hear headphones. I happen to be listening with headphones. Otherwise, I wouldn't have picked this up. Burke and Maggie are talking in the coffee shop, and Joe is about to come in. And if you're wearing headphones, you'll actually be able to hear, and it sounds like either somebody is giving offstage prompts to Burke to tell him the next line to say, or it could be Joe Crothers talking off stage, and he didn't really know that the mic was picking him up while he was waiting to enter as Joe. So that's also something you really have to look at. I never understood also why, this is a continuity thing, but they were talking about the fishing trip, and it was supposed to be done over a couple of days because Burke had a cabin up near Canada.
Right.
And the next thing you know, they're talking about a day trip. And they'll be they were making it sound like it had to be done over a few days. There was no other way they could do it, and there was no real explanation for that. In episode 191, Burke says to Joe when they're separating to find David, and Burke he messed the lineup. They're separating. He says, "We better stick together." No, we can't stick together. So he messed that line up. And also you can see a reflection of the lantern. Oh, in the shed when David is in the shed waiting for Laura, she has magically appeared to him. But if you look closely in the window, now she's holding a lantern. You actually see the lantern moving mysteriously. She's getting herself into position on the set. And you can see the lantern moving across the window as she is moving into position. And then, of course, the camera shifts to her magically appearing. Now, for some reason, also in episode 191, this is Amazon Prime. The crawl, the closed captioning refers to Laura as Angelique.
Oh, really?
For those fans that don't know who Angelique is, the new ones, you'll find out sooner or later. But that was a definite blooper. Angelique, you're not going to see for at least another year. And also, in that very famous scene with the shed where Laura is, the big climax where Laura is burning alive, the camera switches from the shed to Liz lying in the hospital just for a few seconds, and then back to the shed. Right. That was obviously a mistaken thing onto the, okay.
Oh, I thought that was part of it because it was going on at the same time.
Well, later on, that actually did happen where they moved over to Liz, and then they had some dialogue going on. But at that particular moment, that wasn't supposed to happen yet. So I think somebody gave an early cue, and you see Joan Bennett waiting in bed for a few seconds, and then they go right back to the other one. But you could be right, but I think it was more a continuity glitch. It's
premature. Yeah,
it's some 50 some odd years later. Roger is leaving his coat in the hall table again in episode 192 when he could have hung it up in the in the hallway right as you enter into.
I feel like Roger's always leaving his coat on the table.
I think it's great. I think they're all leaving their coats on the table somewhere.
Well, they got Mrs. Johnson to pick up after them.
That's right.
Mrs. Johnson has classic lines with, in fact, when she's talking, with the seance, she says, "Well, everybody's moving the furniture around here." That's because I think Mrs. Johnson's jealous because she's usually moving the furniture. But episode 193, once again, the closed captioning. For some reason, at the end of the episode, it shows Shadows of the Night theme song. Shadows of the Night will not occur for another 2 years. That's Quentin's theme, and we'll be talking about. Yes.
How did I miss that?
You see that in the closed captioning. You got to watch it on Amazon Prime to see it.
I do, but I didn't. I don't have the. Yep. I didn't have
the closed captioning on.
Closed captioning on. I guess I'm going to turn that on.
Turn that on. You're going to see some interesting. Although we don't want to get Amazon in trouble. Okay. Episode 195, a little bit of the camera. As we see Jason's profile, it's panning, and you see a little bit of the side camera as it moves in and it moves out. In episode, and finally, the last one, but not least, in episode 196, Jason goes for his hat on the table, and he nearly knocks the silverware set off as he's doing it. So that's it, guys. That's the world of Dark Shadows in this block.
I love the bloopers. I find them totally endearing.
Absolutely fantastic. And we didn't have a lot of bloopers in the last block. We certainly made up for it this time.
So now we're going to Into the Shadow segment. We're getting our first news report from Collinswood, Maine.
And this is Vicki Ray with news from Collinsport, Maine. Our story opens up with Dr. Guthrie enticing Joe to go to the cemetery to dig up the grave of a dear departed Laura, whilst meanwhile back at Collinwood, Carolyn tries to persuade Roger to give Dr. Guthrie yet another chance. Joe and Dr. Guthrie break into the crypt of one of the Lauras, and the caretaker at Eagle Hill Cemetery forbids it. I love that guy. I just think he's so cute. I don't know why I would have pinched his cheeks.
Well, the caretaker? Oh, he's great. Oh, he's
Frank,
great.
finding out about the shenanigans going on at the cemetery, needs to be stopped due to common decency. Considering this is to help Mrs. Stoddard, but no one seems to know how looking at dead bodies is going to do this. But I digress, as Frank barges into the crypt and states how unprofessional looking at corpses is. Josette shows up by pushing out the casket with a scent of jasmine, although the smell probably did not continue with the opening of the casket. Leaving Frank in the crypt with the crypt keeper, Joe and Dr. Guthrie dig up one of the Laura's graves. Frank looks through the old newspaper clippings and finds the tale of a boy named David, also consumed in the flames with his mother Laura. We learn that Laura and David's names seem to be a thing, so it seems that every time a Laura is born, a David will come within the pregnancy. This is quite a big clue of what is to come, Laura and David's characters. But also, should a new Laura spring up in the future, she will most undoubtedly have a son and name him David. David decides to go away with his mother all of a sudden, much to the shock of everyone he tells. But it always seems like Roger's trying to push the kid out of the house, but that's just my 2 cents.
Yep.
Dr. Guthrie decides that he needs to talk to the fire goddess himself and tries to put out her fire, which does not do well, but gives him a clue into the real Laura. David receives a warning from the ghost of Josette to save Dr. Guthrie. Guthrie leaves to put things in place for a seance. Victoria and Sam, as he did the painting a few episodes prior, and carting David through the first one was going to be traumatic for him, he must have matured for a second seance. A boy grows a lot within a week or two. To the old house for the seance because it is closer to Josette. It seems that Josette's ghost found it exhausting to make her way from the old house to the new house, so they want to help her by saving some ectoplasm along the journey. Laura places a curse on Dr. Guthrie, and we learn that if there is a constant glare in your eyes, it is probably best to pull over, which Guthrie doesn't do and crashes into a tree and burns to death. I personally would have pulled over. I was like, oh, why aren't you pulling over? News passes to everyone of the fate of Dr. Guthrie, and Victoria decides to push ahead with the seance due to her being a quick study on how this is done from previous outings of seances. Sam wants to run and have a drink, but is convinced to stay. David, Victoria continue with the seance, and Radcliffe speaks through David and fits a key puzzle piece into what is in store for David and his mother. Victoria finds out that Laura Radcliffe died 100 years ago, and that this happens every 100 years or so. If the writers remember this, who can tell? And apparently we will learn this in future episodes. No spoilers here, folks. Roger tells Laura that it is time for her to go finally, and Laura is taking David. Victoria, Bert, Carolyn, and everyone are to keep a close eye on David. Everyone is off to God knows where, and Mrs. Johnson is to watch David and to ensure that he does not leave the house. If cleaning the house, fixing fires, cooking meals is not enough for poor Mrs. Johnson, she takes a phone call giving David the perfect time to slip out of the big house of Collingwood. Laura and David meet up in the fishing shack, which soon engulfs in flames. Victoria and Burke search for David upon the return and find Laura and David in the shack. Plenty of hair singeing and deep fall-off stares pursue as Victoria and Burke finally entice David out of the flame, whilst Laura burns to death in an agonizing scream. As Laura becomes ash, Elizabeth Stoddard awakens from her mysterious coma/trance. Elizabeth recovers extremely well for a person waking up from a catatonic state, while Roger, being the fatherly type, tries to comfort David. Right. Life goes back to normal in Collinsport for about 5 minutes when Sam gets visited by an art dealer whom is in love with his work from 10 years ago and wants to do a show with these paintings from that decade of work. Unfortunately, Sam traded these to make his bribe look legit from Roger. Elizabeth returns home, and Sam tries to get the paintings back from Roger, or he will blackmail Roger until he gets these back. This appears to be the big payday for Sam's career. Elizabeth seems to have a bee in her bonnet about the locked room in Collingwood's basement and demands the key. Where this key was before this and why it is important, no one knows why, but it has become an issue now. Victoria makes a promise to Elizabeth, and a stranger arrives at Collingwood, much to the disgust of Elizabeth. The stranger is Jason MacGuire, who was a friend of the late Paul Stoddard, and proceeds to blackmail Elizabeth to what happened on that fateful night 20 years prior. Roger goes on a search for the paintings, taking him down to the cellar. He finds the lock, and being as quiet as a herd of buffaloes in a china shop before Jason makes his way downstairs noisily, I may add, giving Roger a chance to hide in the shadows. I always love it when Roger's caught doing shit. Apparently, the overhead light does work, so Jason burns his fingers with a match while trying to get into the locked room. Roger challenges him, and it seems that the cellar is the new hangout and the place to be seen. After a matching of wisecrack wits, they depart. Elizabeth is not happy that people are finding the cellar the new hangout and lets all involved know that this will not be tolerated. Roger thinks that the paintings are in the locked room, and Elizabeth affirmatively states, no, they are not. Roger stalks out while Jason feels it is time to have a new wardrobe and blackmails Elizabeth to pay for this, which she relentlessly does. Maggie, not the quickest to put two and two together, finally puts it together about that fateful night during the car crash with Laura, Roger, and Burke, and a whole sorry story comes out again. Sam uses this to blackmail Roger and comes clean to Burke on what really happened. Drifter, Willie Loomis, appears and gives us a lesson or two about the Me Too movement in 1960 setting while meeting Jason at the Blue Whale. Willie shows how not to pick up women. He's very coarse, actually. Jason reminds Elizabeth of the secret that they share while Elizabeth continues to look at Jason as something she may have stepped in. Let's just say that her face of disgust is par to none. Burke and Sam confront Roger, which catches Roger off guard. What is the secret in the basement, and why is this place to be? Will David get the psychological support he needs after watching his mother perish in a fire? Will Willie grease his way to lubricating a rapist storyline? Is Jason a stereotype of Irish people having the gift of gab? Will Elizabeth ever look approvingly again? These questions and more will be revealed in our next episode of Dark Shadow.
So that brings us to shedding some light. So, Tom, what are your thoughts of these episodes of Dark Shadows from episode 178 to 201?
Well, I think that this block of episodes definitely is transitional in that it ends one particular story arc, the Laura, the famous Laura trying to get David to go into the fire with her, the way she has been doing every 100 years, especially with David Radcliffe, who appeared in the seance and took over David Hennessy. And that was a nice little performance by the kid, by the way.
Yes.
That was, and that was also a very nice surprise, because the seance was supposed to contact Josette, and then all of a sudden David Radcliffe comes out of the blue, which we never expected. I was very sorry to see Peter Guthrie meet the end that he did.
I know. I really wanted him to stick around just a little bit longer.
I think John Lassell was very, very good in the role. And I mean, I give him a lot of credit. I guess they wanted to get rid of his character. By the way, interestingly enough, and this comes out of, if you're looking on Amazon Prime at the show, you go to the cast, and every once in a while you get a little trivia. And I didn't know this, but they had actually planned. Now we know that Diana Malay left because she was pregnant. She wanted to get out of the contract, and she looks extremely pregnant, by the way. During that last
sad thing is they always covered her up in that ugly black coat kind of thing.
Yeah,
and she was a very beautiful woman, and they just had her shrouded. Oh
my God! But you could see. But they actually had intended to keep going for a few more weeks with Laura. And so it would, and I'm thinking, wow, that would have been interesting, if in a parallel universe they had gone on for a few more weeks with Laura, then killed her off. Then they would have been getting to He Who Shall Not Be Named, and we might as well name him already because it's going to be in the next block of episodes. Mm-hmm. Jonathan Frid as Barnabas Collins comes on, and very, very briefly, Jonathan was on his way out the door. He had taken a job as a professor in California, and a teaching job, and he was on his way out the door when the phone rang for the audition. Now, just think of it, if they had delayed Laura's departure for another few weeks, Jonathan Frid would have been teaching in California, never would have gotten that job, and we would have had another Barnabas.
True.
So it's just really weird to think of that. Incidentally, there is a great video on, actually a great audio piece on YouTube. Fans, this is actually a sound snippet, and you can get it on YouTube. It is Backstage Chatter, and it is essentially a soundbite of director Leela Swift giving directions to the cast and crew before that final scene where Laura dies in the flames. That scene, by the way, was shot on a Saturday, and there were 4 cameras involved. So it was a very special. It was a very special, unique scene, and and you can find that on YouTube. So of course, we have that. The caretaker, my favorite guy, is there, and he has some nice lines, especially. Was that?
He's so creepy. Laura Stockbridge died by fire. Everybody died by fire that week.
They're dead. We must respect the dead. And
I love him.
And I love the line where one of them says to him, "You're the caretaker, aren't you?" And he says, "You're the one who should take care." I mean, they really give him.
I often wonder if he's like a specter or if he's a real person.
I like to think of him as like a specter. He's like a ghost. Because he comes across that, because the thing is, he always repeating the same thing over and over and over again. And you can't have a conversation with this guy at all.
And he looks old-fashioned, like stepped out of another time, maybe.
Like from the 40s.
You mentioned it last time. He's like straight out of the Universal horror movies,
Yeah.
He's the, and Daniel Keyes plays him so well. Roger, as usual, they give him a couple of good lines. My favorite one is table tapping. What next? Are we to read tea leaves after dinner?
Yeah.
Referring to that.
The voodoo one. He's talking about voodoo and all.
Right, referring to seance and stuff like that.
I love him. I just can't. He just doesn't do any wrong. I mean, he's just brilliant. He was such comedic relief, and I don't know if they meant that, to tell you the truth. But I mean, he just does what he does so well, and he's so obnoxious and sarcastic. Yep. Maybe that's why I love him so much. I don't know.
And of course, Joan Bennett is finally back from her month or 2 month long vacation.
And we're hair bows. No, exactly. What the hell is going on with those hair bows? She gets out of the hospital. She's got this great big bow on the back of her head, which never comes off.
Everybody wore bows back then.
Oh shit! I mean, but the thing is like it's just this great big. It's like she took it off the back of her dress and put it on her head. It's just like she always got this big bow on her head. You're like, what the hell are you doing, woman?
But but you go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, I guess that's next episode that we could next week. There's one outfit choice that we'll discuss next week that you just like, oh my god, who's dressing?
I know what you're talking about.
Well, you do. Well, you do enjoy the repartee again, or the rapport, I should say, between her and Louis Edmonds as Roger. You know, now that Joan
She's always so serious, and Roger's just so Roger.
Roger is so comical. The introduction of Dennis Patrick as Jason MacGuire, and I do love his Irish accent is very good.
Oh my God! But he's such an irritating villain. I just want to strangle him.
Well, he's
very charming. He's very charming, you know.
Charming in a very sleazy type way.
Yes.
I know. He is a sleazeball.
Yeah, like the syrupy, charming, like, you know, those people are like an insurance salesman, you know, it's like really cheesy and slimy, but trying to be very likable, and you're kind of looking at them going, okay, thanks.
But did you see how Carolyn falls for him immediately?
Well, she's got a daddy complex. I'm sorry, Carolyn's always gonna have that daddy complex. She never knew a daddy, so it's like if it's a man over 40 years old, she's starry-eyed.
That was really cute, and they're nice to him the first couple of days, but then immediately it gets to the point because they're really establishing the other point I wanted to make. So the Laura plot line is done, and now what do? They go back to the whodunit with Paul, with who's in that locked room, and what happened to Paul Stoddard, Liz's husband and Carolyn's father.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure. I don't know if this is in the same timeline. I could have, because I'm kind of far ahead. But in the beginning, you see Victoria wanting to get into that room, and she hears a female crying. But apparently, ends up not being.
That's back before in the beginning.
But it ends up being supposedly Elizabeth crying in that room.
Oh, that's before. Was that before or that's after?
I don't know. It's supposed to be some kind of ghost or something, so we're not quite sure.
Yeah, that's not in this plot.
I do quite like the simple fact that they're going to be tying up this Paul Stoddard storyline, so we can move on from that.
But
and I do like the idea that they're finally going to be winding up this bloody crash thing with Roger and Sam.
Yes.
So I mean, I guess it's in one way it's quite good that they're going to they're starting to wind some of this up. Though there are some, which we'll get to in the next couple episodes, where we're going to get to the Paul Stoddard storyline, and they probably could have wound up the Victoria's parentage thing at the same time, which
they didn't touch it.
Which eventually just gets left by the side somewhere.
Yeah, we'll never find out what that is.
Talking about being left by the wayside, what about what's his name? Kennard Folks as Garner. One day he's there.
Oh yeah.
One day he isn't.
What happened to that relationship? I mean, it's like
he just disappeared.
My God!
Disappeared.
Like,
they wrote him out.
Victoria's that doesn't feel anything about it. She's fine. She's over it.
I mean, the father refers to him. The father, Richard Garner, will refer to him very obliquely in the next couple of blocks as it moves on. And of course, they try to. They mention him, of course, the next day. But the two of them, Burke and Joe, come in. It was Burke, Joe, and Frank. And they were the ones that dug up the grave and everything. And the next thing you know, Joe and Burke are coming back in. No Frank. What the hell happened to him?
I think that basically what happened there is that Victoria Not a very good lay. Never came back. She was a very bad lay, or she didn't put out. It's one or the other. We're not quite sure what happened there because we know that she's not even bothered he's not coming back. But then again,
I know she wasn't very upset. There's no mention of him. He just disappears.
Yep,
well, she's not a good person to go on a date with, is she? She's like, oh, look, it's so good to go out to dinner. Oh my God, you need to take it right here. We're in the cemetery.
Well, Burke moves right in. Burke moves right in, and he's starting to go out with Vicky again. Yeah. But the one good thing that I did like about Burke has finally realized what a shit Laura was. Excuse my French.
Yeah.
And, and he's come to the conclusion that he said, this is not the woman I met. This is not the woman I know. Roger feels the same way. Roger was saying, what happened to this woman? So
I was reading in other forums, and maybe while you're holding that thought, Tom, before I forget this one, sure. People were wondering, was Laura Stockbridge, Radcliffe, Collins, was she born normal and she just eventually turned into this supernatural being, or was she always that supernatural being? I noticed it in another forum. Somebody was asking about it like last month, and
it's a good question. In this particular block, you don't hear of her prior to Laura Stockbridge. However, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but the old fans will know that you will see Laura coming back.
Right.
And when Laura does come back, and we're not going to talk about when and where, she refers to Egypt.
Okay.
So that gives you a little bit of a sense that she
I get the idea
all the way back there. Yeah.
I mean, I guess the problem with the Laura storyline, and I love Laura's character. I love that.
As did I.
Well, because there's the evil thing that she has to do. The thing is, there's a sadness to it. I don't think she's relishing what she has to do, but it has to be done. Though the storyline about every 100 years is make sure, because we get mentioned 3 Lauras now. We get the Laura present day, and then we get the 1800s one, and the 1700s one, and then they kind of mention a 4th one. So obviously that must be 1600s.
In Phoenix, Arizona. The Phoenix, Arizona Laura.
That's right. Yeah.
So the 100-year thing start making a lot of sense. But the one thing I wish they would have indulged in with Dark Shadows is what happens if Laura doesn't do this ritual? What happens to her? Does her life just end? Does it mean that she lives her life as a mortal? Does it mean that something horrible is going to happen to everything that everyone around her? Does she have to sacrifice herself for the greater good? So we don't know, or that
she have to take her child.
Because you kind of wonder, like, if she has to do this, there must be some benefit to it. Then coming back every 100 years and reliving this cycle. So there must be some kind of benefit to it. But we never know if there's a benefit, or is this a curse, or.
Well, doesn't she talk about the afterlife of when they burn up?
Yep.
That it's a beautiful something or other.
Yes.
Yeah, but at the same time,
the Phoenix world. But I think
that's not enough. That's not enough to to go through all this, though. There's got to be something more. I just kind of wish they kind of gave us a little bit more. Maybe maybe about 5 or 6 lines, a bit more.
If in fact, nice. I mean, we can say that if she actually had been on for a few weeks more, which is what they originally planned, they might have gone into that.
They might have, or they could have wound out the storyline so it could outstayed its welcome a little bit as well.
You think they kind of wound this up?
What I quite like about it's quite sad that it's quite sad that she laughed, but at the same time, these episodes are probably the tightest that we're ever going to see in this block. I mean, this from up to 201. I mean, it's moving in a quick. I mean, it's like the steam trains got plenty of coal, and it's going like a bat out of hell towards this conclusion.
But it was such a letdown when after I just felt, particularly looking at it again, that after it was all done, then the thing that they're concentrating on, as we said, was the Jason MacGuire thing and the whodunit, and also the thing with Sam now telling Burke the truth about the accident. And so we're getting back to that. And again, that's probably in an attempt to wrap it up. But I can see where actually there was some pickup in the ratings during the Laura storyline. So they realized that there was something to the supernatural element that worked with the show. But then after she was out, they went back to the mystery. And things were starting to get slow again. And the fans actually were they were not watching it as much anymore. The series was in danger of cancellation, and this is, of course, what led to bringing the Barnabas character on to see if they could save it to go back once again to go back. So, getting back to this block, I just thought that was a letdown. But getting back to Jason McGuire, I mean, he's a good actor. I think he's a good actor.
I agree.
And he did lend a lot to that.
I think I have to give kudos to Willie One.
Yes.
I'm gonna call him Willie One.
He was a good scoundrel. He was
because
a crazy, scary, slimy individual, and I loved him.
And I know that we'll probably get to, I mean, next episode we'll probably have to get to a little bit more information about the two Willies.
Right.
But
right.
Just looking at this Willie without comparing him to the new, John Carlin's Willie, which we'll get into next episode.
Right.
This Willie is sleazy. There's a dirtiness. There's this disgusting, and there's this slimy thing that you can see what they were hoping for the character, which I can understand why they might have changed him, because for the later
Carlin's just too lovable to be a sleazeball.
This one gives, there's a danger to this Willie.
Yeah,
we don't see
This Willie reminded me of James Dean in a way, from
way.
Rebel Without a Cause.
Rebel Without a Clue.
Rebel Without a Clue.
Yeah, there you go.
Good.
But the thing is that he does look like he looks like he's the kind of person that basically torments women, and he probably rapes women. He looks like a raper of women. He looks like a rapist.
He's very aggressive. He's hyper aggressive.
He's a sleaze bucket. This Willie.
But there's more, but they're not just someone who's bad at pickup lines. This is a person who looks like they can probably be quite violent in it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There's this violence in him that just, you don't see him do anything violent, but there is this threatening violence that
it emanates from him a whole lot more than Carlin's Willie, for sure.
And that makes this Willie brilliant. I say,
Yep.
I can see why. To be honest, I think he was too intense for daytime television. It's too intense,
and
really.
that may very well have been why Carlin was selected for Willie. I think that
we do get a Willie personality transplant with the new Willie as well. Which
exactly, because they're two different acting styles, but that doesn't mean that and with this, and remember also, he's Jason McGuire's buddy. Now, Jason McGuire is a sleaze bucket to begin with,
right?
But Jason is a lot more. Jason's smarter in terms of a conniving sense, so he can mask his sleaziness with the Willie, and the charm and the Irish brogue that gives you a lot of charm. Whereas Willie is just the animal that Jason keeps in check. Willie's saying, "Come on, what are you going to do for me? What are you going to do for me? Take it easy, Willie. We're going to do this for you, but you've got to watch out, and you've got to be and you have to be careful." And you're going to see that with the Jason McGuire character, the way the two interrelate. But they are birds of a feather, I think. Although Jason McGuire,
another thing is we don't really know where Willie is staying, do we?
Not yet.
Because Jason's all wormed up into the house, telling Willie that he must bide his time, and Willie's like, "Where should I stay?" And didn't really go into where is he in the street, So it's like, but the thing is, it's okay for Jason to be like, "Oh, fine, take your time." But if you don't have any money, you got nowhere to stay. You can understand where Willie's kind of like, "Well, I need money. I need something. I got, throw me a bone, throw me a crust of bread."
Well, we don't know yet. This was one episode in this block. The other episodes will be in the next block. But essentially, they
further into Willie.
Yeah, but essentially they introduced him so he could have the bar fight and show how what's the word? Impulsive.
Street fight with a knife.
Mm.
I thought it was with a bottle. I thought he
had a knife, and then Burke kind of slammed it out of his hand.
No, that's the second. That's the second fight.
second.
Yeah, and it's kind of next week. I do think that, it's kind of, I find it kind of weird
Yeah.
There you
Okay,
are.
now I can hear you. Now I can hear you.
It's kind of weird with Burke at the moment because they don't. This is kind of the beginning of the end of Burke as we know him, where basically Burke is now becoming the savior of people. He comes in White Knight. He comes in as the White Knight on steed, saves somebody, disappears, comes back as a White Knight, saves somebody, disappears, and this is what we're starting to find with Burke. I'm finding in next episode we're gonna finish up his storylines, and as we get further into Dark Shadows, I think what I've just said, I think it's gonna become a bit more idealized sort of thing. But it's kind of like they don't really know what to do with Burke. It seems like.
No, he's kind of like a leaf twisting in the wind during this period a little bit.
So what they do with him towards the end of this block is they revert him to Burke was really starting to become more of a mensch, up to, he realized what Laura was. You saw some sense of maturity into him. But then when, of course, he's told about the real truth about the accident, he goes back to the, I want revenge on Roger. I want revenge on everybody. And you're going to help me, Sam, or otherwise I'm going to put you in jail too. And it was, and it's so. And you're right. Well, so they didn't know what to do with him, so they just made him what he used to be. And I think that was a kind of but that's that. But maybe they had to do that in order to clear up that storyline, because you really did have to know he really did have to know sooner or later what was going on with the accident.
Is it just me, or back in the day, you know how when you got soap operas now, or even, scary shows or whatever, horror or anything, that guys, I don't think the gym was a big deal back then, because guys are kind of thin and they don't have that buff, pumped up look, and all these, like Burke, he's kind of a small guy, and you kind of think of him as like tall, large, and in charge. But when you see him with his turtlenecks on, he has goosebumps. He doesn't have, like the big bicep thing going on. I don't know why I noticed that.
But I think it's normally like you normally see him in a suit, and the suit kind of covers everything because he's got the shoulder pads. So therefore, he's kind of like he has kind of like the A-frame, that Italian cut. It's like kind of goes down to a triangle down to his hips, and then so you have this impression of him, and then when you do see him in like regular clothes, like, oh, okay. The suit does make the man in this case. So,
well, James Hall was not a big guy either. He was this, and incidentally, he gave a great Midwestern accent. James Hall, by the way, comes from Tupelo, Mississippi. And if you talk to him today, he's got a real Southern accent that you could tell from a mile off. And that's his real accent. So he did a very good job. I didn't hear a whisp.
I couldn't tell, and I live down south, and I'm an old Yank, so
he did a great job with that.
I didn't even notice that one bit.
He did a great job. He did a great job. If you were to talk to him today, and but it was again. I'm glad you pointed out that you liked his interpretation of the role, Keith, because that is forgotten nowadays by a lot of the fans who fell in love with John Carlin, and James deserves. Even though it was 5 episodes, he deserves a lot. He deserves a lot of credit for establishing
paving the way.
Role. He paved the way.
Well, when we get into next week, when we do the next block of episodes, we can get more into this. But I do understand. I don't think the Willie that we have that's introduced now could be the same Willie that's going to be introducing. Right. Later on, I don't think that actor could have done that, and I can understand where they were going with the new Willie. But this old Willie, I would have liked to seen the old Willie's storyline continue a little bit further, because I love the menacing and And I felt like I needed a shower after watching him because there's something really
you
dirty
see how
and
he was
sleazy.
just like leer and, after Victoria and Carolyn. I mean, he was just he's a dirty boy. He just was.
That's in the next block.
Yeah,
But he but without getting, but it was a good introduction to him.
I mean, I found something else that was a bit weird is the art dealer showing up out of the blue.
Yeah.
For Sam's. And the thing is, look, again, this is something that we're going to go into in the next episode. But she was fantastic. And I said that she did a fantastic job. There's something very classy about her coming in and just the lines that she had and the way that she portrayed herself.
She was New York. She was pure New York.
And you wanted to see more of her. And unfortunately, I don't think we ever see her.
No, I don't think so. I think it was a one-time. I think it was a one-time deal. But she was, but she was very good. She knew her lines perfectly, and her execution was flawless. I want to mention Clarice Blackburn, Mrs. Johnson, who once again chews up the scenery sometimes. I mean, the thing where David left the house and she was supposed to watch him and she had to answer the phone downstairs. Why they don't have extensions in Collinwood, I'll never know. Since they have 40 rooms, you think they only have one phone, and so she runs up. And so she runs up to get him, and then Vicky calls and where is he? And she's going crazy. She looks like she's going to have a heart attack. She's running around. She goes into his room. She looks under the bed for him. I love that when she looks under the bed. Why the hell would he be hiding under the bed? Well, I mean, we know that he hides in boxes. He did that in the cellar. He put himself in the box, and he also put himself in the box in the shed. But Mrs. Johnson doesn't know. But maybe she does because she's running around. I think that she was great comic relief, and and then when she says nobody wants to do anything around here, all they want to do is give orders, and she did once again add a lot of humor to this block, which I think was really necessary as a counterpoint to the danger of Laura and all the other serious stuff that was going on.
I found something a bit odd, though, is that if Elizabeth doesn't want Jason McGuire staying in the house and she's unhappy about it, why did she offer him the cottage? Why didn't she just offer him the cottage? Now that Laura's gone, it's like the cottage is free.
For that matter,
it's kind of weird.
For that matter, Peter Guthrie died. They needed his help. Why wasn't the seance to get Peter Guthrie back to help them? Anybody ever thought of that one? That would have been great.
I thought about it, but I just figured, well, they got a reason for whatever. I mean, I often wondered what an outline they. I mean, sometimes their story seems haphazard. I mean, it's like he said that these first episodes of the Phoenix storyline and everything was really tight, but things did kind of, it seems like they were just throwing shit in there every once in a while. It's like,
yep.
Let's see if this sticks. Yeah, throw it at it. Yeah, okay, that sticks. Let's go with this. Okay, this doesn't stick. Oh no, let's drop that.
But you still got to give the writers a lot of credit. Ron Sperk did a lot of these episodes. Malcolm Armstein did a few of them. But as you said, Keith, the storylines were still very tight. And they threw in a couple of they threw in the kitchen sink on this one, but. I think that can be overlooked when you think of everything else that was going on.
I have to sit there and say that the way they wound up the Phoenix storyline, I really, really liked a lot. I thought you're on the edge of your seat. You just couldn't wait to sit there. You just had to see God forbid in the day, it must have been hell waiting for the next episode. I mean, luckily, because of Amazon Prime and videos, stuff like this, we can jump right into the next one and just keep watching, because it's almost it got to the point where you actually have to put on the brakes because oh my God, I got a life that I need to outside of Dark Shadows. That I have to go to work, I have to get some sleep or whatever, and you have to force yourself to stop this. But in the day when you have to sit there and wait for the next day for the next episode, especially during this time, was fantastic.
Or Fridays to Monday, which still pisses me off because I just love General Hospital. It's just like, oh man, don't leave me, don't do me dirty like this over the weekend, Like,
but I have to wonder, because these episodes were in February. So I'm kind of wondering, it's like, at that time, it's like, it must have been hell if you just missed one episode, because at the point they're going so fast that if you missed one episode, you missed quite a lot of information.
It's not like
they
you
were
could set
giving
your
you
DVR back then or VHS.
Well, it's not like the beginning episodes where you can miss 2 or 3 episodes, but you can still pretty much jump right into it. Yeah. Here, I figure like if you did miss a couple, you might have been a bit lost a little bit what's going on, especially to the conclusion of the end of the Phoenix storyline where it starts moving extremely fast. It's like, they weren't waiting to Friday before something big happened. Something big was happening every single episode, sort of thing.
Well,
normally with soap operas, what you get Monday, lead up, Friday, big, so you have to come back on Monday. Here it's like every single day was like something, it's like.
Well, Keith, you raise a good point, because here I think you're now starting to see the complexity of the storylines for really the first time, and how they interweave with each other, and it's going to get a lot more intense, as the older fans probably know. And at one point, even the writers had lost track of what was going on, and the famous story a couple of years later is that they actually went to the fans out on the street and asked them about the plot lines, because the writers forgot what was going on. And so this is really the first time that you start to see all this, and the fact that they only had 2 writers on staff that were really doing the job.
Did they used to do sweeps back then?
Sweeps?
Well, yeah, we're talking about like rating sweeps. Yeah,
yeah,
there was rating sweeps at that time.
Yeah,
where they you got to get your ratings up to a certain extent by a certain time, or you could be canceled. And I imagine the Phoenix is probably during one of those sweeps.
I think February sweeps. I think they do sweeps. I know we talk about it.
Maybe
the shows that they're talking about sweeps. I was just wondering if they did that back then too.
Yeah, they did. They were. I think one of their sweeps that they had to do something by a certain time, and that's why the Ghost of Josette shows up. And all of a sudden, they got a spike. And they got a renewal,
That's right.
extension.
All it took was the Ghost to get people interested again.
Yeah, and got extensions and stuff like this.
But I have to. The one guy though, the parapsychologist, I thought that was really cool, because no one ever talks about parapsychology.
Yep.
Up until that point, really. In anything. Now it's like everything's out the window. Everybody's got to be a ghost hunter or whatever.
Well,
and I just thought it was kind of cool to see, like, the first time I ever noticed anybody talking about being a parapsychologist on any televised anything or just anything.
Well,
sorry.
That was also groundbreaking, because, as I think I mentioned on another block, it was a couple of years before On a Clear Day You Can See Forever. And and it was if you consider, it was in the love generation, and the hippies were starting to come into vogue, and parapsychology, mysticism was part of that. So I think the Dark Shadows was kind of groundbreaking in that sense.
Exactly. Well, I mean, who would have thought of, like, we got Supernatural now, and we got Sabrina, we've got all these supernaturally based shows. And back then, I mean, well, you had your Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie and all that would start becoming to fruition. But I mean, as far as, just hardcore supernatural, parapsychological, and all this other stuff that came out, it was very groundbreaking. And I could see where because people don't want to say that they're interested in it, but they like watching it. It's like, it's just cool. It just is. Admit it. Y'all like vampires and werewolves and ghosts.
When Dark Shadows came, on the heels of, what was going on in the cinema with the Edgar Allan Poe Corman series, and all that sort of stuff, and Ghosts and all that sort of stuff, or taking this wind out of the Hollywood sales, the major studio sales, because these films, these independent, paranormal ghost stories are taking over.
But remember, Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie were comedies. And that's the big difference with Dark
Right.
Shadows, because they were playing this seriously, and of course the classic things. Of course, the actors looked into the camera where the scenes are about to close with faces of horror as you hear the Robert da da da.
I know. My husband comes out of the back room all the time. You got the da da da. He goes, we're watching Dark Shadows all day again, huh? Because the music is just so foreboding, and it's so typically it's stereotypically a soap opera when you hear that music. So
I do have to either say that I do think they dropped the ball a little bit with after the death of Laura. They should have had Dave. It's almost like David. It's like, was his memory wiped? Because he doesn't grieve.
Nobody talks about it. You don't hear anything about it after that.
No, his memory was wiped because he was. Not right away, because there's the scene where where they're outside and they're looking at the house burning and everything like that. But after he gets back to Collinwood, it's almost like he goes into a fugue state, and he remembers very little about it.
But no one ever talks about that one thing. That was a really big deal. I mean, Laura Collins
lost his mom. He saw his mom die.
And there's just nobody talking about it at all. It's just like, well, was that some fucked up shit or what? It just like
it's almost like it never happened though.
Yes,
it's like, it's over. Ding dong, the witch is dead. Let's move on. Where's the yellow brick road? Here we go. Here we go. Come on. But yeah, I kind of wish they did have like a little memorial. That's a nice, especially when Roger was trying to reach out to David, and just had like a nice tender moment. It wouldn't take too much to have just one little tender scene where they.
Well, but he did. But he did after Laura died, and Roger goes to talk to David in the bedroom, and they are having a really good scene there, where where Roger is saying, everything's going to be okay. I think that Roger, once again, feels tremendously guilty that he was not there he even says, why wasn't I there that night when everything was happening instead of going into town and I don't know what he was doing, having fun. And just like with Matthew Morgan earlier back in the episodes, he didn't believe David when David told him, that Vicky was kidnapped or whatever it was. Roger doesn't trust the kid on a basic level. And then this is the second time we've seen that the kid was either telling the truth or the kid was really in danger. And Roger feels tremendously guilty about it and tries to make up with him.
Yeah, I just think I guess what I'm saying, I think I would like something a bit more about grieving. Just a little bit of grievance in there, because we are talking about a character that's closely linked to their family members, someone's mother. That's all, someone's ex-wife, sort of thing. Well, and even though I know she was kind of this character that's causing death, and there's something evil about her, but because the way that Diana Malay portrayed Laura, for me, I always felt this sadness with her the whole time I'm watching it. So therefore, she wasn't just a villain that died. For me, she was a bit more than just a villain who died.
Well, she was somebody's mom,
Well, and there's reasoning behind why she had to do the way she had to do it, because there are, which we never know, but I'm assuming there is some consolations if you don't do this and you don't follow the structure. If you don't burn, you don't bring your son with you, and you don't burn to death, and then this is not going to happen. We don't really know what this is, and we don't know what happens if she does break the cycle. So we don't really know that. So therefore, that's why I felt quite sad for her, because to be honest, even when she wasn't very good at quipping back to people, she wasn't very good at fighting back. Really, there's just this sadness, this melancholy, this grief that goes on with her. She's like one of the weaving widows on Widow's Peak, grieving for the people who are never coming home. And there was that going on there was all that entwined with what else was going on with her. And so that's why when she died, it's like, oh, it's great how it all happened. But for me personally, she was kind of like a miscommunicated, misjudged villain. You know, she's one of those. That's what made her interesting.
Well, I think it was more interesting. We talked about this before in the beginning. There was a lot more of that pathos that came out of her. And I actually think she was a precursor to the Barnabas character that way. You almost wanted to feel sympathetic the way you would later on for the Barnabas character, which will come up. But then they just made a real bitch out of her, and completely evil. And nobody liked her. I thought it was very brilliant, by the way, on the way Guthrie managed to isolate her. Between Guthrie and Vicky, they managed to isolate Laura from the people that could have helped her out, Burke and Roger. Vicky convinced Burke finally to come out of his trance. And what was it? And Guthrie, I think Roger gave Guthrie a hell of a time over it, but Roger had to, and especially when Roger saw the book open in the drawing room by itself, and that was a great scene where Josette opened the book with the newspaper clipping of Laura's death in 1867. When Roger saw that, he was a skeptic all along, and making all these crude lines. But when he saw that, it all fell apart, and he had to realize that there was something supernatural about it. And I really think it was a very good plot device for the way Guthrie isolated her, and that made it even sadder, Keith, to speak to your point. She really was alone at the end.
Yeah. Well, I also think the reason why that's maybe the Eve or something. For me, the reason when I watched this, and this is one of my favorite storylines as well, and that's probably the reason I'm more invested in this storyline. But I always thought that the reason why that she became a bit more frantic by the end of it, because she was on a deadline. It's not like she could just do this anytime she wanted to. She had a deadline. It had to be done at this time, this date, at the full moon or whatever, and this had to be done now. And so she's on the tight. So that's the reason why, for me, that she became more frantic for the storyline before she burned to death, because she was on a tight line. She couldn't push this back a week or a month or whenever, or she couldn't even do it early. She couldn't do it like a week early. She had to do it at this time. And so as the time became closer to this deadline, that's when she becomes more frantic, a bit more evil, because she's caught up in whatever this curse is. And I said before, it would have been quite nice to know what would have happened if she turned her back on the curse. What does that mean? It would be nice to get a little bit of information about that, which, we'll see if that ever concurs. Just Dark Shadows. We may never get an ending. But I have to say that my only sorry point about the Phoenix storyline is that I would love for Dark Shadows, because normally when it does go into syndication, they start with the Barnabas storyline, they move forward. Right. If they could just go back to start it from the beginning of like when Laura Collins first appears, and start it from there and go from there forward. And I think that's why I think the Phoenix storyline does get lost, and most people, just remember the Barnabas onwards. And it's quite sad that this one of the best parts of this
I agree completely
does get ignored, and that's quite sad.
Yep, that's true.
I know that we do get Laura revisited a lot further down, but
right.
It still does pale to this story now. So to a certain degree.
Well, and I don't want to talk too much about when that does happen, but it is good to see that character again. Curtis liked her very, very much. I think he was sorry, she was pregnant, she had to leave. But I think that when Curtis had her in mind, if anything was going to end, a couple of years later, she was free to do that and to come back. So I think that
she was stunning as well. I'll give her. She was stunning. I think the only other person that could stun her off the screen in Dark Shadows would be Angelique later on. But she was very stunning. There's some camera angles about her that she just looks. She's kind of a cross between Angelique and Carol Brady.
Well, she's kind of ethereal, isn't she?
She does have a Florence Henderson look about her.
That's good. That's good.
She's more ethereal, though.
Yeah.
basically he didn't start looking for Mike. But I mean, now that you're talking about it, later on, Laura will be pitted against Angelique, and that's very good. That's very good. I think that was what really attracted, one of the things, the many things that attracted fans later on. But getting back to this, there was a lot to be said in terms of the way they utilized the characters very effectively. I don't think there was one character that they did not utilize. I don't really think there was one character that was wasted this block. Do you, Keith? Vicky?
Not really. I mean, they found a way to make Joe useful. Maggie's kind of floating off on the ethers on her own.
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit. But even there, when she talks to her father and they have the heart-to-heart and about the accident, and the father tells her about it, and you really see what a good daughter she is. I mean, on the one hand, that's great acting with Kevin. On the one hand, if
anybody's tortured by the car accident, it's Sam, because Sam is just so fucked up because of this. I mean, he's just like literally in the bottle because of this car accident situation. Bert's all mad because he wants to get back at Roger, but it always seems to fall back into place. And eventually the vendettas, don't really come to fruition.
I always thought, when did Maggie's mom die? Do we ever find out when that was?
It was years ago. It's very obliquely referenced, but I would say I would put it at 12 years. I'll tell you when it was. I would put it at around the 10 to 12 years prior, because because Sam gave the history that the reason after the accident he took the money from Roger in order to pay for the mother's hospital bills in Boston, and 2 years later she was dead. I remember he said that. So I think that's what we're talking. That's
why I assume that his alcoholism probably was compounded with the death of the woman that he loved and Maggie's mom.
Well, that's when he started drinking. That's when he says it.
Yes.
So it wasn't just the accident, but I guess he probably blames the accident, which kind of like starts events, with the mom dying afterwards, and so on and so forth. So he's probably how it's like if you're a person and you go through a series of bad stuff through your life, you always spearhead it with this one incident that's kind of spearheaded everything else off, I guess.
Well, it's not only that.
That's how I read it.
He needed the money because he wasn't making enough as an artist, and he accepted the money from Roger, and therefore committed fraud and perjury and who knows what else. And he's been living with this all these years. So Sam is really, you really see it in this block, and it's a good character development. I think he's really a really tragic figure.
Yeah,
he's a strong character though too. I mean, the acting is I think is fantastic.
Sam Evans was great. David Ford, sure. Well, Broadway experience. Remember, he was one of the first actors they brought on. Leela Swift brought him on to kind of up the ante regarding acting experience, and Sam did a great job. And quite frankly, Burke was the villain here. I mean, I really felt sorry for Sam when he's spilling his guts.
Especially when he caught on fire in the living room almost,
Oh, that was
he's the second Sam, isn't he? There was an original. We had was that?
Yes, that's right.
The original Sam. I can't even remember the original Sam now.
Mark Allen,
that was
original
it.
Sam.
And I can't remember him now. And
Mark Allen, you don't, because it's a totally different. Again, you're comparing acting styles. But Mark Allen was more. To be fair, I don't think they gave Mark Allen the character development that they were just starting back then.
Yeah, precisely.
And they gave David Ford a lot more character stuff to play with.
Well, I mean, looking back at when Dark Shadows first started, when we are here, we're not even, Dark Shadows hasn't even gotten its year anniversary yet. And there has been quite a few changes with characters and lines and, stuff like this. And, but I remember, the first few episodes that we did as we were covering it, they were quite painful, some of them. But
yes, please.
Come on, get on with it. So
But then again, you know, like we say every time we get together, you know, it really does give you a whole appreciation for what follows after episode 201. When you when you see how all these things have been set up to interact and interplay, and I mean, I never really watched all the beginning ones up until recently, and so it does kind of, you know, set everything into motion and give the foundation for what's to come. So I really appreciate the new episodes, even though some of them were painful.
Now, the only thing I do have questions about, which I think we should go into before we sum up everything, is if Jason MacGuire was a friend of Paul Stoddard's, and he knows Elizabeth very well, it doesn't seem that Roger has any recollection of who Jason MacGuire is. Is that just me?
Well, he was away at boarding school, was he not, when all this stuff happened?
Yeah,
20 years ago? What is the age difference between Elizabeth and Roger? Because it doesn't look like that.
Well, she's supposed to be, well, he looks older than her.
She's older. She's older than him, remember?
She's like 10 years his senior, isn't she?
Something like that, yeah.
Is she?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And the only thing that's mentioned is that when Jason MacGuire says that he met Roger once 18 years ago, right in the Collinwood drawing room. And Roger's, oh, you did? I don't remember that. You know, that kind of thing. So Roger probably was
no
away.
use for anybody. Roger hates everybody.
Well, no, I'm just thinking that, like, if Jason MacGuire was such an important role in Collinswood, with being Paul Stoddard's best friend, and Elizabeth being married to him, you just think that there'd be more of a memory of who Jason MacGuire is, because obviously he stayed around in this area for quite a while, but no one seems to remember him except for Elizabeth. That's all I'm saying. It just seems to be like...
He's not a very memorable... Well, when you think about it, and I'm not going to say what happened...
I don't think it's every day you get a smarmy Irishman coming to your small town.
To Collinsport. But, you know...
Oh, but I got to say, look at the way Jason MacGuire insinuates himself. The first thing you know, he's saying, I'm going to the haberdasher, Liz, and I would like...
Haberdasher. Oh, I know. I could have killed him. He's such an asshole. He really...
and now, Liz, I think I'd like an allowance, Liz. I'd like an allowance. That'll help me get along a little better. And he, of course, is going to ask for more. But and yes, I think I'd like a room to stay in, Liz, as well. And Liz says, well, we can put you on the main floor. That's where the servants are, Liz. I want a view of the ocean on the second floor. I think that was really...
And they're always after me Lucky Charms, they are.
That's correct. He's magically delicious.
I like it when he drinks Roger's brandy and Roger's in the room.
Oh, I got to tell you.
Would you like a brandy, Roger? Yes, it's my brandy.
Here's another blooper. I forgot. When Burke is drinking from that same snifter, it's cognac. But now when Jason drinks it, it's, well, maybe they put brandy in it.
Isn't cognac a brandy?
No.
I don't know.
No, cognac is an aperitif. It's
like a liqueur.
And you don't really drink cognac after a meal because it's better after. You don't drink it before a meal. You normally drink it after a meal.
Well, you know what it is? They probably used up the cognac and then they filled the snifter with brandy. There's the way to get around it.
Or Mrs. Johnson's been drinking and just changing the bottles around.
Mrs. Johnson's probably been hitting the hooch behind lines, yeah.
Wouldn't it be funny if Mrs. Johnson were at the Blue Whale in their cups drinking with Sam? That would be a hell of a scene, you know?
I mean, the best thing about this series, the best thing that they actually did was add Mrs. Johnson to the household. Yep. Because now we have someone who can sit there and spread the gossip and share the wealth of information. And I love... She's so pious that she's one of those like religious people who like damns people for not doing what she thinks but does the same thing they're doing. You know,
do what I do, do as I say. Yeah.
Do as I say, not as I do. Yep.
And she's just judgmental commentary that we have now, which is fantastic. So.
Well, then she says she's such a God-fearing woman, and she doesn't, but she's interested in the supernatural on the other end. So she gives you, different vibes when she's, she kind of contradicts herself sometimes.
Well, she runs with the foxes and the hounds, and she blows hot and cold, so you just never know where you are with her.
This is true.
No.
So that brings us to our morning has broken, which we're basically be talking about our final assumptions and ideas for these block of episodes. So, Vicky, what are your final thoughts on episodes 178 to 201?
I'm kind of sad to see him go without the closure we were talking about. But then again, Malay had to go because she was going to have a baby, and you can only push it so far because she looked pretty pregnant towards the end of her tenure. But again, we do see her again eventually.
They ran out of furniture for her to stand behind.
Yeah, to stand behind and everything else. And those god-awful outfits that they could have, I don't care. When you're pregnant, they could have put some better shit on that woman. She could have rocked something else. It looked like canvas. It looked like they threw a canvas bag over a beautiful woman. It was terrible, But no, I really like these beginning episodes. Like I said, I never used to watch. I never remembered these because I was really little, wasn't allowed to watch it. But I mean, it does lay the groundwork for everything that is to come. And it does, kind of explains everything way down the road for some storylines. So I think they're very beneficial to watch. And I just love to watch the acting and how that they, progress, and how their acting, becomes more diverse and more strong through, the storylines to come. But yeah, I love them. They're great. I like the caretaker. I still haven't figured out if he's a dead guy or an alive guy, but love caretaker.
And what about yourself, Tom? What are your final thoughts?
Well, I also do want to put in, I don't know if we were doing the best people and the worst people.
Yeah, that's what we do after this segment.
Oh, we're doing it after. Okay,
yeah.
So the final thoughts. The final thoughts are that here is a wrapping up of the Laura plot, done extremely well, followed by an anticlimactic, in my view. They were going back to they were becoming formulaic again. I think it would have been a much better. Of course, with more than Monday morning quarterbacking, but wouldn't it have been great if right after the Laura character they introduced another supernatural character, rather than going back to this formulaic thing that was losing But the good thing is it's not going to happen too long, because as we're going to see in the next block, it's going to wind up, and then they're going to get into the real meat of it. But I think that I think it was a tremendous effort on the part of cast and crew, and it is so much different from as you mentioned, Keith, the way it was in the beginning, where it was as Collinwood turns. Now it's a lot better.
And for me, I think that these block of episodes are probably some of the best that we've seen up to this point in Dark Shadows. And I got up to quite far watching Dark Shadows previously. I've never got to the end, which I will be getting to doing this podcast. But I have to say this has always been my favorite. And rewatching it, this is probably the second time I've actually rewatched these episodes, and I got so much more out of them. And I have to say that these are probably the strongest acted, strongest written, and probably the strongest storyline that doesn't meander away too much, that we've known that Dark Shadows sometimes does. Tend to go really, really well, and then take this weird left or weird right. And it just seems to kept quite straight on the straight and narrow with these storylines. There are a couple things I do miss. I think that when Laura does die, it does leave a hole, and I do agree with what Tom was saying. I do think, though, that we tend to get this in television programs where we get this fantastic storyline that goes on, and then when that storyline finishes, then we're kind of left hanging a little bit while we're waiting for the next thing to start up. And I think that
ready for a wedding, you got all these preparations for the big day, and then the big day comes, and the balloons got all the air out of it.
Yeah, it's like Christmas.
Sad.
You spend all that time wrapping all the presents and everything, and then everything's done in an hour. So they're gonna
Thanksgiving dinner, 5 hours to prepare, 15 minutes to eat, and fall asleep in front of the TV. So,
But you do get this in television series. I mean, if you remember Buffy, it's like, you get like these great big, and then you get to the end of the season of Buffy, and this great big storyline happened, and then next season starts, and you have like these 5 or 6 episodes where nothing really is happening because they're kind of meandering their way through. But I do understand that. I think that they're going back before they can go ahead. You have to go back, tie up these lines, so that way we don't have to keep referring back to this, because we need to make the characters that we have. Maybe we need to change them, and in order to change them to fit into what we got planned for you, maybe we need to go back to solve some of this stuff. Though
there's also some very good writing.
I will agree with you that the Jason MacGuire storyline. Hang on your seats, people, because this one does get drawn out past its so.
This one can get painful.
It does get painful. Though without it, we don't get Caroline dating someone who's age appropriate, though it may not be personality appropriate, but we'll get to that later on. So, but overall, I love these episodes. Dinah Malay, I think she was a huge asset. And I think there is a hole left with her not being there. And I do feel the show does do that a little bit. But with the new Willie, from the one episode that we have, and that we will see later next episode, I think that we got someone who's dangerous, and we're not quite sure. And Jason MacGuire, we're not quite sure about him yet, which I think there are some interesting additions that I think that we'll go into more next episode.
I do want to also, before I forget, very good writing technique. And there was one set of scenes, and Keith, you could probably define it, where two characters are talking about something, and then they switch to two other characters that are talking about the same thing. And so one character will ask, character A will ask character B a question, and then the next thing you know, you're going to the other scene, and the other character has answered that question. They're having parallel conversations about the same thing. There's a name for this. I'm blanking out on it, but they did that very well in a conversation. I think it was between Burke and Vicky on the one hand, and I forget the other two. It might have been Roger and Guthrie, but I'm not sure. But that's also a very good, I'll remember it in a half an hour. But that's also, I think that keeps the viewer on top of things. They're trying to follow two conversations at once. They're both about the same topic, but how is the other person going to respond to that? And it goes back and forth, and it's done very effectively.
I'd sit there and say that, just to add for what I said, I'd sit there and say there's some really strong camera work going on in these episodes as well.
Yes.
Some really, some very good cut scenes, and it's like you can tell where everything's really tight at this time, yes. and it really does show. And even though some of it's framed, even though it's in black and white, some of it's framed very beautifully. The way that the shadowing that they're using on them and stuff like this is probably tighter than I've ever seen as well.
And once again, they used the top-down view in the seance in the old house, which was very effective in the other scene. And even
they do some tracking shots as well, which is quite amazing. If you ever see any background information about Dark Shadows, and you look at the cameras they're using to do a tracking shot is quite a feat. I mean, we're talking about moving a VW van from side to side to get a tracking shot, which is something quite amazing that they were able to do. So
that's why you had the bloopers. But even with the bloopers, I think they worked very hard in this block. They really did, to their credit.
So now we're getting to the segment where we name our favorite character and our worst character of this block. Starting with you, Vicky, who's your favorite character of this block, and who's your worst?
I have to say my favorite character would have to be Dr. Guthrie, because I like the fact that he brought the parapsychology element into Dark Shadows, which probably spurred a lot more interest in it and probably may have saved the series, because supernatural cells, they say sex cells, but I think supernatural cells too. And I'd have to say that my weakest, and God, I hate saying this, the person that I was kind of disappointed in was Burke Devlin, because they kind of neutered him during this period of time somehow. And instead of coming across as the strong-willed, bull in a china shop kind of guy, he kind of, like I said before, is like a leaf twisting in the wind. You don't really know where he's going with this, and he's kind of pussing out a little bit when it comes to Laura Collins, and he seems to have lost his mind, and he's just going to believe everything I don't know. He's usually like the big scrappy do kind of guy, and they kind of downplayed his masculinity in this part of it.
He becomes Victoria's bitch boy. So.
Yeah, a little bit. But then Burke can't figure out who he wants to nail throughout this whole series. Is it going to be Victoria? Is it going to be Laura? Is it going to be Carolyn? He goes back and forth. He's such a slut puppy too. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'm surprised he's not hanging out at high schools. What about yourself, Tom? Who's your favorite and worst character for this block?
Well, I'm going to give ties once again. I agree with Vicky about John Lascelles, Peter Guthrie. You really miss him because he provided such structure. He's the intellectual professor, and he was literally guiding them all. But more than that, and Vicky, and they say Vicky says he was our friend.
Yeah.
And I think that's very poignant. So it wasn't just somebody they hired to get Liz better. It evolved into a very emotional, mutualistic relationship between the characters, and he showed that he cared. Now you never knew where he was living. I mean, you kind of thought he was living in Collinwood. He was there at Collinwood.
Or was he staying in an inn somewhere? He really did seem like
he used to go back and forth to Bangor, didn't he?
Oh, is he banging her? Is he banging somebody over there?
Everyone goes to Bangor.
Well, he takes off his glasses for that, I hope. But
he was always driving back and forth to Bangor, Maine, though, wasn't he? So. That was definitely there.
Well, he was from Dartmouth. So what the hell happened to Dartmouth? Is in New Hampshire, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what the hell happened to his? Well, he must have taken the sabbatical, which they never mentioned. So it's between him and. I do have a fondness for Jason MacGuire, the Dennis Patrick character. I call him the poor man's Burke Devlin.
He's such a turd.
Yeah, but he's traveled like Burke too. You get that? He's traveled. He talks about I sent you something, Liz. I sent you a postcard from Tierra del Fuego. Didn't you get it? You know that kind of thing. And just like Burke has been around the world. The difference is Burke's got money. MacGuire is broke, so that's the difference between the two characters. But he's such a rogue. He's a real rogue, and I honorable mention to Jimmy Hall, whose interpretation of Willie was,
hardcore.
Yeah, absolutely. Gee, the worst. I'm gonna cop out. I can't think of anybody that did a bad. I mean, maybe Carolyn to a certain extent. I don't know if they gave Nancy Barrett a lot to do other than nurse her mother, because everything took a back.
Well, she did kind of show strong through prior episodes before
that was there,
and we noticed her acting ability had finally come to fruition. They'd given her some lines
in that block, in the other block. In this block, she's kind of relegated to a secondary status of nursing her mother. I mean, she's there for a mom, and that's kind of nice, and stuff like that. I wouldn't even put her though as the worst. I can't think of anybody in this particular block that did a bad job. I don't think so. No, I don't think anybody did a bad job there in this block.
My favorite has to be Diana Mallet as Laura, because I think if you leave a series and just leave a hole, which we're gonna experience next episode, and I think that she was just fantastic, and I think that the way that she did it and the pathos that I got from her, I said before, she's the reason why this has probably been my favorite block. That's all so far. As far as the worst goes, I think to me it's got to be Catherine Lee Scott a little bit. It's just because there's just no room for her, though she will get stronger. We'll see is coming there. But even though that once she finally puts two and two together and she comes up with what actually happened on that fateful night during that car accident, you just think, really, woman, where in the hell have you been? It's like everyone, we kind of gone through this before. And it's like, because we did have a scene earlier where Burke shows up while Vicky's having dinner and the whole story comes out. And then they kind of reiterated this all over again. And like she's just known about it now. So I thought it's not so much the fault of Catherine Lee Scott as an actress. No, it has more of the way.
Writing.
I think it's very, very underwritten, and there's no way to utilize her in the Phoenix storyline at all. So it's kind of like we're going to throw you a scene of her, and then we're going to fade out. And because before that, she was just like the jealous girlfriend, Joe's jealous girlfriend was, before this last episode that we did. And then we just got her here. She's kind of like stuck in here going, okay, so that's about it, though. It's mainly just because it's kind of poorly overwritten, and I think they could have done something a bit more interesting in that scene.
I'll tell you one thing. They did They did a terrible makeup job on Joe Crothers when he comes home from the fire. He goes to Maggie's house, and they look like they put blackface on him or something like that. I mean, he was so charred, but again, I'm digressing.
Was he even in the fire? That's what got me. Did he?
No, he was cleaning up. Cleaning up all night.
Yeah.
He was the volunteer Collinsport volunteer fire department because he was cleaning up all night after the fire, and he looks like a wreck. But Maggie loves him. She didn't care how he looked. She was just thinking. And Sam comes out, and Sam is like just waking up. Oh, hi, Joe. And he just walks by. Like the guy looks like a wreck, and he's, oh, hi, Joe. That kind of thing. I thought that was funny.
Well, if you go into YouTube and look at the cut scenes, you can see Joel doing his Al Jolson impersonation from that time. No, I'm kidding.
I wish they had.
That's a joke. Mammy, I would love you. I would love you.
The sun shines east. The sun shines west. That's funny.
So, well, that brings us to the end of our Dark Shadows. Next week, we'll be coming out with another Dark Shadows. We'll be doing episodes 202 to 220, and that's something special because we do have an extra week this month, so you get an extra episode of Dark Shadows.
This is where Lord Voldemort enters.
Well, we also like to mention is that we have been nominated for Rondo, and thank you everyone who's been nominated us. And if you'd like to vote for us, you can find how to vote for us in our liner notes and our show notes, which are available on every single format that you watch us on, or listen to us on, which is Podbean, Spreaker, YouTube, Cashbox Radio, TuneIn Radio, and iTunes, and various Spotify and various other ones. And if you look in the description, you can see how you can vote for us. Please take the time. It's very easy. All you do is send an email, and all you do is say who you want to vote for. We put the information there. You can cut and paste it if you like. So if you do that, we finally love you for it. We'll love you forever. We also have a competition at the moment. If you email a picture of your pet to info@llpodcast.com, you can win a hoodie. We got a special literary license podcast hoodies that we're giving away at the moment. And we will have one winner per month, and we'll be using your pet for some of our merchandising, mainly our merchandising video sort of thing to advertise the Literary License Podcast. So if you'd like to win a hoodie, make sure you send an email with a picture of your pet to info@llpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media, which is also available at Facebook, Tumblr, Pinterest. Now, Pinterest, if you'd love to see some fantastic pictures of Dark Shadows and some unseen pictures and stuff, go to our Pinterest account at Pinterest, www.pinterest, that's PINTEREST.com. Look at Literary License Podcast, and you'll see a lot of fantastic pictures coming your way. They're not available anywhere else. And you can also follow us on Facebook, as I said before, and Tumblr. And where else are we found? Pretty much a lot of other places that my mind has now escaped me and died. Sorry, folks. And of course,
internet radio station. The internet radio station.
Yeah, I've done that. Tune in for Cashbox Radio and all those.
We forgotten any platforms? Let us know.
Let us know. We seem to be. There are some places that I found ourselves which I'm quite surprised at. Well, I'm sure how we got there, but if you're listening to us enough, thank you. So, and just remind you again, we'll be doing Dark Shadows. Next month, we will be going into our Guilty Is What Guilty Does, and our first episode of the Edgar Allan Poe will be The Black Cat, the 1934 film we're covering, which stars Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff.
Boris Karloff.
Which is very much the reason why films went through a censorship after this called the Hays Code, which we'll get into during that episode. Yeah. But again, as I said, we will be doing another Dark Shadows episode from 202 to 220, which will be out next week.
200 to 220.
And I guess that's good night from me. So it's good night from Vicky. Say good night, Vicky.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Tom.
Good night to all.
And we'll see you next week with our Dark Shadows 202 to 220. Good night.
Johnny. Take a half step back. Lean back a little more.
Interrupt you.
No, you get it.
Car waiting.
Who's there?
Okay,
Yeah, give her a walk right there, please. Okay, now please don't forget those lines, because every time we go up because of lines.
John,
Yeah.
this is where she wants it now. Okay. You'll just remember to stop me there, huh?
I'll move it back.
Okay.
Now give me enough warning so I can get this thing lit and rigged.
Yes. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. I'm ready. Right.
Are you ready with the flash? Clear his camera, please. Clear that camera. Tommy, where are you? Yeah, clear from the camera for me. What's the matter, Frank? What's the matter, Frank? Okay, come on, man. Okay,
This has been a Literary License Podcast production. If you cry for help, there's no help for you